This is How We Doing It, a podcast about resilience. Join me, your host, Howie Craw, as I explore the true stories of those who have been knocked down by life's biggest challenges and despite insurmountable odds, went on to achieve great success in both life and business. Become a master of resilience, and you'll see that anything is possible. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. It's Howie Craw of the HowieDoinIt show. Today, I am so honored to have Alan Stein Jr. on our podcast. Alan is a world-renowned basketball performance coach who made a decision after 15 years at the peak of his career to make a change, to become a corporate speaker, to bring the lessons that he learned on the hardwood into the boardroom. He's a podcast host, he's an author, but I think his biggest achievement, he'll tell you, is a proud father of 3. He's an executive leadership coach, and I consider him one of my personal mentors. Alan, it's an honor to have you here.
Oh, I'm equally excited, Howard. It's so great to connect with you, my friend.
Alan and I met I guess it was a little bit over 2 years ago at a retreat. And I met Alan thinking that he was like myself, one of the guests there. And it turned out you were just getting your speaking career going, and you gave us all a speech. And the speech really moved me for a lot of reasons. And one of the things was that you talked about doing the work when no one is watching. And you told a story to all of us, and I since have repeated it. So you know the story I'm getting to. As you were coaching at a Nike Elite camp with Kobe Bryant, I'll let you tell the story from there.
For sure. It was, it's crazy that event took place well over 10 years ago, because that was back in 2007. And I did have a chance to be the performance coach for the Kobe Bryant Skills Academy. And I've basically spent my entire life in a basketball bubble and just consumed with basketball and training. So I had always heard this urban legend of how insanely intense Kobe's individual workouts were. And, here in 2007, I find myself on his camp staff. So I figured, this was my chance. This was my shot. So at my earliest opportunity, I went up to Kobe and asked if I could watch one of his workouts. And I remember him being incredibly gracious and very open and telling me, yeah, man, that's no problem. I'm going tomorrow at 4. And I got a little bit confused because I had just got done studying the camp schedule, and the camp schedule clearly said that the first workout with the players was the following day at 3:30. And Kobe recognized that confused look on my face and clarified that by letting me know he meant 4 a.m. Well, I wasn't smart enough to come up with an excuse on why I couldn't be somewhere at 4 in the morning, so I'd pretty much committed myself to being there. And I figured if I was going to be there anyway, I may as well try and impress Kobe. As a young trainer, this was my opportunity to really leave my mark. So I made the decision to beat him to the gym. So I got up at 3 a.m. the next day, and as soon as I got up, I got dressed real quick, and I jumped in a taxi, and I headed to the gym. And I got to the gym about 3:30 in the morning, so of course it was pitch black outside. And yet the moment I stepped out of the cab, from the parking lot, I could see that the gym light was already on. And I could even hear a ball bouncing and sneakers squeaking. I walk in the side door at 3:30 in the morning, and Kobe's already in a full sweat. See, he was going through an intense warm-up before his scheduled workout with his trainer started at 4. Now, out of professional courtesy, I was the only one there. I didn't want to be a nuisance or a distraction, so I just sat down to watch. And I remember being shocked. Because for the first 45 minutes, I watched the best player in the world do the most basic footwork and offensive moves. Kobe was doing drills that I had done with middle school-age players. Now, it's important for people to know, though, this is Kobe Bryant. So he was doing everything at an unparalleled level of intensity, and he was doing everything with surgical precision. But the actual drills he was doing were incredibly basic. And his whole workout went on for a couple more hours. And once again, I just sat there quietly. Even when it was over, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to his trainer. I just quietly left. But my curiosity got the best of me. And later that day, I had to know. So I went up to him at camp and I asked him and said, quite frankly, Kobe, you're the best player in the world. Why are you doing such basic drills? And I remember it like it was yesterday, and it still gives me the chills. He smiled, but he said with all seriousness, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics. And I remember that was one of those epiphany moments in my life that it taught me such an important lesson, and that's just because something is basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy. And yet many people use those words interchangeably as if they're synonyms. And I've learned that really what it takes to be successful, what it takes to be happy, what it takes to be fulfilled. I mean, you fill in the blank. Whatever it is that you want to be good at, the most efficient and most effective way of getting there is continually mastering the basics and focusing on the fundamentals. And, you know, someone as renowned and as elite as Kobe, to admit that his quote unquote secret is never getting bored with the basics, that really reframed how I viewed everything in my life. And to this day, I try never in any area of my life to leave the basics and to leave the fundamentals, because I know that they're the house. They're the foundation to which the rest of the house is built. And what I've come to learn, and you teed it up so insightfully, Howard, is that the vast majority of the work that you do on the fundamentals happens during the unseen hours when no one else is watching. So perfect example, I'm a professional speaker by trade, as you are as well, and I'm giving a talk in 2 days down in Charlotte. Everything I'm doing leading up to that event that no one will see, the rehearsals that I do here in my apartment, the due diligence and research that I do on the company so I can customize my message, all of that work is being done when no one is watching, and yet that is what will determine how things go Tuesday morning when I actually turn the mics on and I step on stage. So what we do during the unseen hours basically makes or breaks us as human beings.
You know, I always like to use a line, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Carnegie Hall being the recital hall that every person that ever played an instrument aspires to get to. It's very simple. Practice, practice, and practice.
So true.
So listening to you tell that Kobe story, and it never gets old, it's incredible. It's like, how bad do you want it? And Alan, I don't know if you realize this, but every day when I do my live videos, I end by saying, be where your feet are. Now, I believe I got that from you. Is that something that you could say that you said in one of your speeches, or is it something you would hear to, be where your feet are?
Well, you did get it from me, but in all honesty, I either got it from Nick Saban, the head football coach at Alabama, or from Oprah Winfrey. I don't know which one, because I followed both of them religiously, and both of them have said it. Both of them have said it many times, and I know where I got it from. I don't know who the original author is, but there's just something about the concept of being where your feet are that really resonates with me and was really in alignment with this concept I have about living in the present moment. And the moment that I heard them say that, it just had this visceral response that, yes, that's exactly the definition of living in the present moment, is make sure your head and your heart are wherever your feet are. And I'm glad that's something that's resonated with you, because as with most things in the speaking world, we're all hearing and learning, taking ideas from other people, and then we're paying them forward and sharing them with our respective audiences.
Let's go back a little bit. So we were at this retreat. You gave a speech. And again, I didn't know you were a speaker. I just thought you were one of the people there, like-minded people trying to figure out better ways to live our lives and things to do. And our hosts were great, Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely. So we met a great group of people. And I remember that cold plunge. You and I looked at each other and like, okay, we got to do it. We're here. And then all of a sudden, because Jesse's there, it's competitive cold plunging. And at the end of the 2 or 3 days that we were there, I had a plane ticket in my hand, and you were walking to your car. We had already bonded, and I said, hey, Alan, are you driving back to D.C. by any chance? And you said, yeah. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to the Westchester County Airport. I have a plane ticket. How'd you like a passenger? And you said, I'd love it. We went to get gas. And I think it was a 6.5 hour ride because it was a Sunday afternoon. We never stopped. We never took a bathroom break. And I consider that a vital moment in me being where I am today because you're ahead of me in this process of making change, becoming a speaker, becoming an author. You already had a podcast at that point, and you were on to, a new beginning for yourself. And you kind of laid a roadmap out for me. And I took your advice and I went to take that class in Philadelphia with Michael and Amy. And through that, I've met such amazing people. So here we are. And I believe that that was probably in August of 2018.
17.
17, right, because I was training for the marathon and had just done a triathlon. So that is a little bit over 2 years ago. Watching your career, it's amazing. I mean, you are on the road a lot, speaking to some really big groups and getting your message out, and your book is out. So why don't I ask you, what's life like on the road, and what was it like writing your first book?
Well, let me backtrack just a bit because that was an equally profound car ride and conversation for myself as well. And, a couple things to highlight. One, you mentioned that at least as far as converting over to professional speaking, that I might have started that transition a little bit before you have. So maybe I've created a few footprints that have been helpful for you to follow. But realize that in so many other areas of life, you've done that for me, as far as, I mean, your children are much older than my children. So you've blazed many paths as a father that you've taught me things that are now helping me in that regard. So please know that anything that I've been able to do to hopefully help you and mentor you in the niche of speaking, you've very much done that to me in many other areas of life. And I'm really incredibly thankful for our friendship. One thing that I think is really neat was, so we met on a Friday. It was a 3-day retreat, basically, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And one of the speakers there was talking about the benefits of meditation. And they mentioned something that if you didn't want to go all in as a yogi, that you could try this app that had just come out at the time. It was called Headspace, and that it was a guided meditation, and you could follow that for 10 minutes a day. And up until that point, I had always kind of resisted meditation. It just never seemed like my thing. But there was something about being at that retreat with so many like-minded, special people that something really resonated during that talk. And I remember I downloaded the Headspace app that day, and then I started the Monday after we got back. And I'm very proud to say that I have not missed a day since that Monday. And this morning was my 851st straight day. And the reason you and I have a kinship with that is that means we met 3 days beforehand. So I've known you for 854 days because I can just look at my Headspace app and add 3 to it. So that's why I know that it was, back in 2017. So that part has been really cool. But, it's the other neat part about that retreat, there's a few things, and then I promise I will answer your question. There was around 30 to 35 of us, I believe, at the event, speakers included. And I would easily say 15 to 20 of you guys I still keep in very close touch with. Like, there was 2 people I was messaging back and forth this morning on Facebook that I met at that retreat. So to go to an event and 2 years later, you actually consider yourself good friends with half of the people that attended, that just shows you how special that event was. And, that was very early in my speaking career. So to have an opportunity to speak at an event for someone like Jesse Itzler, someone that I had admired from afar for many, many years, and to be around him was just incredible. And I still, to this day, absolutely think the world of him and of course, his wife, Sarah. But that was a transformational weekend for me. And, to have that opportunity to meet you guys and to still be in touch after all these years is definitely one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. And I say all of that because it lays the foundation for everything that's come after that. My speaking career has come a long way in those 2 short years, and I'm very thankful for that. The book same thing. I mean, I look at the book as kind of a one-off from the speaking because it's really the message and philosophy that I speak on is encapsulated in the book. So that really was a turning point in my life that weekend, and you are a major, major pillar of that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I too am in touch with many people from that weekend. Just an incredible group. Now, in terms of headspace, I'm pretty disciplined. I think of myself as somebody who has a lot of discipline. And you and I started out by messaging each other. Did you do it? Did you do it? I got up to like day 85. And whatever life got in the way, and you continued, and my streak ended. I've had a couple of starts and stops as it relates to my meditation. But I do know when I see that number up there, I'm like, wow. And that's exactly how long I know you. So, congratulations on 851 straight days. But that's one of the things I love about you is your discipline because I know I am a disciplined person. You, though, take it to another level. And in your book, you talk about that so much. You talk about the unseen hours. You talk about the work that you have to put in when you want something. So I really hope that my audience, we listen to guests that come on that do incredible things, but what is it that drives you, or what nuggets can you give our audience that allows you to take something as simple as meditation and say, "I'm going to do this," and then you don't stop. Nothing gets in the way, and you just take it to levels that are really I admire. They're incredible.
Well, I appreciate that. I think one thing that's incredibly important for listeners to know is, first of all, we have, even though as human beings we are one person, and we can't really compartmentalize the different areas of our life. But I do believe that we have these different silos, and we have a silo in our life for relationships, and we have a silo for our physical health and well-being, and we have a silo for our financial life, and we have so we have these different areas. And in full transparency, I've been an athlete. I still think I'm an athlete to this day. I'm sure some could argue, but I've been an athlete my entire life. And when it's come to the disciplines of physical fitness and eating right and things like meditation, those things have just been easier for me. I'm just wired that way. So I say that because there's other areas of my life where I have in the past really lacked that discipline. And a perfect example, financially, I've not been the most financially disciplined person. I'm almost 44 years old, and I'd say for the first 42 years of that streak, I did not make the most sound financial decisions, and I didn't have the financial discipline that I'd like to believe I have now. And the reason I have it for these last 2 years is because I've hired a coach. I've hired a financial advisor and a guy that's been helping me with that. And the reason I say that is I don't want someone to look at this little snapshot of my headspace meditation streak and think that everything in my life is of perfect discipline, because there are some things that come easier to me, just like there's some things that come easier to you. And then there's some things that are really, really challenging. And for everything like the Headspace meditation app streak that I have, I've had other streaks that I've fallen off of quickly, and I've had difficulty with. So the reason I say that is twofold. One, I want to make sure that your listeners give themselves the grace and compassion that they would give a friend. That if they start, let's say, a exercise streak and they get 2 weeks under their belt and then they fall off, like, it's okay. Give yourself some love and some grace and some compassion, and then just look at the next day as your opportunity to start a new streak. Don't focus on messing up or missing a day or what the streak could have been. Focus on starting anew. So have some compassion. And all of that feeds under one of my most common things I talk about on social is not playing the comparison game. Because it's a game that you can't win. And that's really been highlighted to me now that I'm in the speaking world, because as you know, especially since we share many friends in the HPS community, there's so many phenomenal speakers out there. And if I sit around thinking of all of the speakers that have a higher fee than I do, that get on bigger stages than I do, that do more gigs than I do, that have more Instagram followers, like, I'll just end up feeling really bad about myself. So I've learned to be able to take a step back and applaud applaud and respect and appreciate what those folks have been able to build, but then realize that I'm running my own race. And I say all of that to kind of circle back to, discipline is really doing those things when no one's watching. It's doing things regardless of how you feel. So it's kind of this concept that my friend Ben Newman says is standards over feelings. So you simply do what's right and you do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. But I just want to make sure your listeners know that while there's certain areas of my life that I'm incredibly disciplined and do a really good job, and I'm proud of that, there are other areas that I'm really challenged by and that I've often struggled with, and I'm looking to improve those. So I'm sure that I could point to you. I mean, with the rim to rim run you did with Jack Daly and your marathons and your triathlon, like when it comes to that, you've been far more disciplined than I've been. So where you might look to me and say, man, that Headspace meditation app streak is pretty impressive, I can equally throw that right back and say that the training that you did to complete those incredible events required immense discipline. So this is why we don't play the comparison game, but why we should all look to each other as sources of inspiration, and we should look to emulate certain traits, but never be jealous or envious of what other people are doing. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer and might not have even answered your question, but when it comes to discipline, find the areas in your life that just resonate, where discipline becomes a little bit easier, and use that to create some momentum. And hopefully you can apply those strategies to the areas of your life where discipline is a little bit harder.
It doesn't matter if you answer the question or not, because I just love listening to your wisdom. And the comparison game, it is so true. We're all caught up in that, and it just stops you from growing. If somebody has 10,000 followers versus it doesn't matter. Be content where you are. And I think your honesty is always something that I admire too. You put out some really honest things on your social media sites. And, I recall a time when looking from the outside in, Alan Stein Jr.'s got it all going. He's got 3 beautiful kids. He's got a career. He's got a book. But yet we suffer sometimes from depression. And I didn't know that about you. And I remember you putting up a post that you talked about it openly. And having suffered from it myself, I was like, wow, that is really cool that you would go and share those type of things. So I think if somebody's not following you who's listening to this, you should really. Your quotes are hilarious. And my son said to me today, actually, hey, Dad, did you know Ray Donovan started last night? So I immediately forwarded him your post from like 2 days ago with the 10 things that Ray Donovan does well. And swinging a baseball bat was one of them. So I knew he would relate.
I love it. No, I appreciate that, your support. And I think we, as folks in this industry, and I'm using that term loosely, people that try to post uplifting stuff on social media, that do their best to not only entertain but engage and connect with people, and obviously people in the speaking world. It is important for us to be somewhat transparent, and and to be able to let folks know that challenge and struggle and self-doubt and all of these things, they're part of the human condition, and nobody is fully immune to them. I'm certainly by any means no expert on depression, and I know that what I went through is more than likely mild compared to what other people have gone through. But I found for myself that the best remedy for my mood and perspective is kind of how we started this conversation, which is just learning how to appreciate the present moment and to be where your feet are. That I found that, at least in my case, and once again, this is not a prescription for others, depression often begins by looking backwards and looking in the past and what happened before or what didn't happen before to give you those depressed feelings. And anxiety, which goes hand in hand with depression, is usually caused from looking forward and worrying about what might or might not happen tomorrow or next week or next year. And at least for me, when I can do my best not to be consumed by the past, I want to learn from the past. I certainly want to learn from the mistakes I made yesterday, but I'm not going to live in the past. And I want to be prepared for the future, but I'm not going to live in the future, and I'm not going to spend time worrying about tomorrow. That when I can spend most of my time and most of my collective mental and emotional energy in the present moment, it's just raised my perspective and my mood, and has certainly helped with any anxious or depressed thoughts I may have had in the past. So just being in the present moment, which right now, I'm not worried about anything in the world except having a nice conversation with my good friend Howard Craw, which hopefully will, be of some benefit to the people that follow you and listen to you. That's the only thing I'm focused on right now. So, and I don't say this to make light of anyone that's going through tougher times, but I've got nothing to be depressed or anxious about if all I'm focused on is right now having a nice conversation with you. And I found that that's helped me. And I can't state enough that I'm not making light of any of those situations, and that it's that easy, because it's not. It's taken me years of conditioning to learn how to be where my feet are.
Yeah, and I know too that being present in any situation, and we spend so much time thinking and worrying about the what ifs and the future. And there's a statistic that I use: 97% of the things that we worry about never happen. So to steal all that time from you about things that are out of your control, that you don't know if they're going to happen, is really just stealing from the moment that we're in right now. So I appreciate that, and I understand that, because I do come from a world of warriors, and I grew up in a worried world. And so actually, there's not a lot we could do about the past, like you said, but learn from it. And really being present with you doing this is something that's amazing. And now, a word from our sponsor. I would like to thank everybody over at Cruiseport Conference Center and offices. See, they offer state-of-the-art meeting spaces in the heart of sunny Fort Lauderdale, just minutes from the beach, real close to the Fort Lauderdale International Airport and Port Everglades. From phone calls to live streaming, Cruiseport Conference Center and offices has you covered. With Cruiseport Conference Center and offices, you can come and go as you please. With 24/7 coded access, you can work anytime, day or night. I suggest you go through the notes here, click on the website, and check out the floor plans. I know, I'm glad I did. It's an amazing place. And now, back to our show.
Here's what I find to be arguably the most powerful and empowering mindset I've come across. What you just mentioned, and that's an alarming stat, the vast majority of what happens to us in this world, we have zero control over. But we have 100% control over how we respond and how we react to whatever that is. And to me, that is an incredibly empowering feeling to know that I have the keys to the car. And no matter what happens to me later today or tomorrow, it could be the best thing in the world. It could be the worst thing in the world. It could be a small win, or it could be a minor nuisance. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm in full control of how I respond. And I find that if I consistently choose a response that moves me closer to happiness, fulfillment, success, significance, respect, higher performance, fill in the blank. If I constantly choose a response that moves closer to that, then life is pretty good, and life will continue to get better. So I'm the only one that can control that. So, once again, it could be something as trivial as sitting in traffic. I know you spend a good deal of time here in the D.C. area where traffic is pretty awful almost any hour of the day. Well, sitting in traffic is not something I control, but I choose the response. Now, I can do what most people do, which is let my blood pressure escalate. I can get frustrated. I can honk my horn. I can give people the finger. I can let it put me in a bad mood. Or I can just smile and flip on a podcast or listen to an audiobook or catch up on phone calls, or just not let it consume me. And I can choose a path that will take me closer to being the man that I want to be. And as I've gotten older, that is really the filter at which I run everything through in my life. Every single decision I make, conscious decision, I decide whether or not something will take me closer to being the man that I want to become, or does it take me further away? And I try to consistently choose something that takes me closer to the person that I want to be. And that's what I find incredibly empowering. So I no longer worry about what's going to happen, because if it's something good, then I can be grateful for something good. And if it was something, that I contributed to, I can make sure that I continue to do more of that in the future. And if it's something bad, if it's some type of adversity or something like that, I can still choose to learn a lesson from it that I can apply moving forward. Or I can even use it as practice to test my resilience or my patience. That's how I view traffic now. I take a deep breath, I smile, and just say, hey, sitting in traffic right now is teaching me a lesson on patience. It's teaching me a lesson on kindness and compassion of my fellow drivers. So actually sitting in traffic is an exercise in making me a more patient and loving human being. And I take it as just another rep, just another opportunity to practice that. So now I'm not insane. I don't prefer to sit in traffic. But when I do, I can use it as something that I actually believe is going to make me a better human being. So all of us are riddled with those opportunities to do that, and we just need to consciously start choosing that even more often than we maybe currently do.
Consciously is a big word there, because while you were describing how you're handling traffic, I'm thinking, God, do I need a session with you? I've gotten much better, but having lived in New York, which people ask me why I left New York, I said traffic drove me out. Then I went to D.C. and I was like, okay, this is just as bad as New York. But two, I've learned to get better. I mean, there are podcasts, there are audio books, and there are telephone calls. But, one thing that your book, Raise Your Game, which is so much about sports, but relating it into everyday life and business life. I know that you just recently had a post too with Denzel Washington, and which movie was your best? And he says, my next one. Well, when we talk about that worry, a lot of great athletes performing at the highest levels. Why you could go to them down at crunch time with a few seconds left on the clock is because they're not scared of failing. They're okay if they do. They know that they gave it their shot. So you're not worried to put the ball in their hands of a KD or a Kobe or a LeBron, because they're going to give it their best, and they know they could handle the pressure under those circumstances. But I'm sure a lot of athletes are self-doubters and not sure they want the ball at that moment.
Absolutely. And that confidence comes from one thing and one thing only, and that's demonstrated performance. The guys that want the ball at the end of the game are the ones that have earned that confidence during the unseen hours, that they've made enough shots in empty gyms to know that they deserve an opportunity to win the game when it's crunch time. And those that don't, those that are kind of anxious or nervous or scared or don't want the ball, it's because they know they haven't put in the work to deserve success. And that's something of very high utility that we can apply to any area of our life. And, the kind of go back to this concept of worrying, which I think is a common one amongst all people. Worrying never makes anything better. It doesn't do anything. I mean, the way I always frame it, and I use this as a major parenting tool now with my children who are still young, is if you're worrying about something you have control over, then stop worrying and do something about it. Like, why waste your time worrying if you can do something about it? And if you're worrying about something that you don't have control over, well, then why waste your energy? Because worrying is not going to make it any better. I mean, we can use traffic as an example. I mean, think of all the people, whether in New York or D.C., that sit in traffic and are livid. They're frustrated. They're annoyed. They're cranky. Their blood pressure goes up. Does that change anything? Like, just because you get angry, do the cars all of a sudden get out of your way and you get home sooner? No, it doesn't do anything. So when you get angry sitting in traffic, the only person you hurt is yourself. That's the only person. And, I know it's hard to quantify, and we've got a lot of things going on in this world, but I think someone with a lot more intelligence than I could make a good argument that stress is the number one killer of people in the United States because it contributes to heart disease. It contributes to all sorts of physical ailments when your body is stressed. So in essence, and I don't mean this to sound too overly dramatic, but when you're sitting in traffic, something you don't control, and you choose a response of getting annoyed and frustrated and angry, you're literally killing yourself. And that's about as foolish of a decision as one could make. So the quicker you can make that transition from being frustrated to a more serene state, and again, listen to a podcast or make some calls or just enjoy some silence, just pick something that's going to move you closer to being who you want to be. And those little things will really start to add up. These little things we do every single day ultimately define who we are. And, at any given point in your life, wherever you are is a direct combination and accumulation of the habits you have and the decisions you've made. That's it. I mean, where I'm standing right now at this very moment, the vast majority of that is due to the habits I have and the decisions I've made. So if you don't like wherever you are in life, then you need to start changing your habits and changing your decisions.
I know, and people are so busy talking about changing their habits and talking about how unhappy they are, but they don't always act on it. And I know in conversations with you how important exercise and diet are. And I'm not familiar that much with the intermittent fasting that you've been doing, but I am very familiar with this recent movie that's had a big effect on me, Game Changers. Are you done with your 30 days or are you at the end of it? How do you feel? And for those that aren't familiar, Game Changers is on Netflix. It's all about switching to a plant-based diet, and the scientific results using athletes is astonishing. So how are you doing with that? How are you enjoying it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, things that fall underneath the health and wellness and fitness umbrella have always been things that have fascinated me. And, I do my best to constantly be on the lookout and keep a very open mind to new ways that can help me look better, feel better, and perform at a higher level. Those are the three big ones. Because all of those combined, I mean, that's gonna equate my health. I mean, yes, I want to have high longevity, high vitality. I want to have energy to be able to keep up with my kids and to perform, my role as a professional speaker. I want to look good because, that leads to self-confidence, and confidence is really important when you're on the stage. And of course, I want to feel good. I want to try to delay the aging process as much as possible so that my joints and my muscles and my back and my knees, all feel as good as they can. So I've always been looking at different exercise programs and different diets, and I've toyed around with a lot of different things. I've been doing the intermittent fasting for well over a year now, and the goal of the intermittent fasting is I only eat within a rather small window every day for the most part, and it does stray every now and then. I only eat between noon and 6, and the other 18 hours of the day, my body's actually fasting. And it's beyond the scope of this podcast to really go deep into that. But if you just Google benefits of intermittent fasting, you'll see a whole preponderance of info there. As far as the actual diet, for about the last 3.5 years, I've followed a slightly modified paleo diet. Most of my diet consisted of lean cuts of chicken, fish, or beef. And I tried to get stuff that was grass-fed, wild-caught, and cage-free, eggs, nuts, tons of vegetables, sweet potatoes. That made up most of what I would eat, I would say 80 to 90% of the time. But I have lots of friends that are vegans, and they follow a 100% plant-based diet. And I've always been just kind of fascinated by that concept. And then like you, I saw this documentary called Game Changers, and it just kind of put me over the hump just to try it. I'm very well aware that any documentary is going to take the slant of the person that's creating it. So I'm pretty sure that as compelling as Game Changers was, I could easily find another documentary that could be just as compelling on following a paleo type diet or another type of diet. So I didn't look at Game Changers as the be all end all, and I certainly didn't look at it as it's 100% correct and it's the only way to be. But it made enough of a compelling argument for me to want to try it. And I started it the last week of October, and I committed to doing it till the end of November. So that would be about 4.5, 5 weeks that I'll be on it. So I'm about midway through right now. And it's been interesting. I mean, I don't see very much difference in how I feel and how I look, and how I've been sleeping and how, my energy and all. I haven't seen a huge difference. The toughest part for me is I just love food, and a good portion of what I like is a nice piece of fish. Or some sushi, or a good fillet, and not having those things has been really challenging for me. It has made me get a little bit more creative and find other ways, to sustain a daily diet without most of what I was eating before. So I've enjoyed the challenge. But I just like experimenting, and I love keeping an open mind. And I never want to be one of those guys that I'm always doing things the way that I used to do them. If something's been working really well, like meditation, I keep doing it. If there's something that I think could give me a better result, I want to be very open to trying it, and trying it with discipline, and then evaluating it. So on December 1st, I'll kind of sit down and weigh the pros and cons of this 5-week experiment, and I'll decide how to move forward.
So we're looking at a vegan Thanksgiving for you then.
Yeah, I may take that one day off and just eat a normal Thanksgiving meal with my family. I haven't decided that. I got to wait and see what food is provided first, because I don't want to just be sitting in the corner eating broccoli while everybody else has this full smorgasbord of food.
I'm with you. I'm vegetarian these last few weeks. I haven't made the leap, but my daughter has been really a full vegan now for a while. And so when it's Thanksgiving, we always have to prepare a vegan Thanksgiving for her. So there's plenty to choose
For
from.
sure. I love it. And, for me, and I don't want to forget that pillar. As I mentioned, for me personally, and all I do is I try to share. I never try to place judgment or place values on anyone else. But, how I look is important to me. How I feel is important to me. How I can perform from an energy standpoint is important. But so is my happiness. And I'm one of those guys that I don't want to deprive myself of things that I actually enjoy. So I love food. I mean, I'm somewhat of a foodie. That's one of my favorite parts, funny enough, about the speaking industry is that I get to travel a lot. And every time I travel, I try new restaurants, or I try new places to eat, or try new cuisines. And I really love that. And the thought of limiting that too much just based on following a vegan diet is probably not something that's going to be long-term for me. And that's ultimately what I hope your listeners gain from this is try not to think in terms of right or wrong or good or bad. Try to look at everything in life as whether or not it's a good fit for you. Because once again, a vegan diet might be working really well for your daughter. She looks good, feels good. She's happy on it. She loves it. For all of her reasons for doing it are in alignment with her values. That's wonderful. I have no doubt that I could find someone else that is a carbon copy of that, and yet they choose a different diet. So I think it's all about finding what's the best fit for us. But in order to do that, you've got to try some different things. I think just saying, well, this is what I've always eaten, or this is best, it's important to try these different things. And at least I'll know on December 1st, hey, I gave veganism a 5-week try. So even though that's a very small window, at least it gave me a glimpse into what I was trying, and I can decide whether or not this is for
I
me.
love that you're willing to try. I like the open mind, and that's something that I always feel that I'm open-minded to. I'm not judging anybody by what they eat or what diet they want to follow. I just think if somebody is having weight issues, that they should just get it under control by being on some sort of routine or diet with exercise so that they could stop the complaining, reduce some of the stress, and live longer and look better. You mentioned a few times about looking better. I think you look great, Alan. I've seen you lately. I think you're looking great.
Thank you.
It's hard for me to believe that you're already Hank Aaron's number, Willie McCovey. There's been some great players with the number 44. Who comes to mind for you at number 44? I know who you're going to think, but what do you think?
Oh, who do I know that's number 44? Am I supposed to know someone?
What number did Pete Maravich wear?
Oh, did he wear 44? I don't remember.
Okay, I'm not sure, so
I'll have to look that one up. That would be pretty cool. If he did wear 44, then I'm going to get myself a Pete Maravich authentic jersey when I turn 44.
Yeah, he wore number 44. Look at that.
That's pretty cool. I got to get me a jersey. I turned 44 in January, so that'll be my birthday present to myself.
He also wore the number 7 later on, but I'm looking at some pictures of him playing with the number 44. I did remember him. And then he also wore the number 23. But when he played with the Jazz, he wore number 44. So that's kind of what I remember.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to
And
get that. That's pretty cool, man.
he was also on Atlanta. So yeah, he played on a few teams. So the state, we haven't really talked much about sports. As a Knick fan, it's really depressing how an organization that in the greatest city in the world, in an iconic stadium, just can fall flat a week into the season again. I think they've played one playoff game since the year 2000. Now, I know you were on my friend Kevin Sheehan's show one day, and you started getting into owners. And I look at two of my favorite teams, the Jets and the Knicks, and it's Johnson and it's Dolan. So sometimes this ownership is just, it's really not great.
No, and what you just hit on the head there is how important ownership is. People immediately look simply to the talent that's on the floor, and then they look to the coaching staff. And yes, obviously, those two things play a huge role in a team's success. But there's so much, and we'll keep playing on this concept of unseen hours. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and ownership makes a huge difference. A couple examples of that just in the NBA. When Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, when he bought the Mavericks, they were not only one of the worst teams in the NBA, they were one of the worst teams in all of professional sports. And from the time he purchased them to them winning a NBA championship was only a handful of years. And it all started with this new, fresh mindset and the way that he treated the players and treated them like champions so that they would act like champions, and the way that he rallied the community to want to come to the games because he made them a fun fan experience. Like that, ownership matters. And then another example is, the Warriors. I know at present the Warriors are really falling on hard times, with most of their roster of the last 2 years has been either traded, left, or injured. But let's not forget that the Warriors were pretty bad for a long time, and then they got new ownership. And then, of course, they drafted great players like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. And next thing you know, they're championship contenders and are creating a dynasty. So ownership matters. And I this is not about me having an opinion or making judgments on Mr. Dolan, but I know that there's a lot of people in New York that aren't very supportive of him or his leadership with the Knicks. And now that trickles down to everything else that goes on, even the play on the court. So this just shows that leadership in any area of life is so important. And
absolutely, I saw pictures of yesterday's game in the Redskins Jets. The stadium was more than half empty at halftime. I mean, don't they see that? All right, we're gonna go into something positive as we do. We're talking about football. You had a picture up with your children and your dad from Penn State. And your quote was in the locker room or on the way to the locker room. And I think the quote goes, "Are the habits you have today on par with the dreams you have for tomorrow?"
Well, a couple things about that. So it's right outside of the locker room in a little training area is that quote, and the players have to pass it every single day on their way out to the practice field. And on the other side of the door, on the inside, is a pretty cool quote by Gandhi. So the main lesson is that I'm kind of Gandhi-like, that I have quotes up. I'm just kidding. Here's what's cool about the Penn State quote. Everything in the world comes back to relationships. And when I played basketball at Elon, there was a football player there named Michael Hazel. And Michael is one of my good friends at Elon, and he is now the director of football operations at Penn State, and he's James Franklin's right-hand man. And here, 25 years later, he and I are still friends and still in touch. And he was the one that's always been very positive and supportive of my work, and was the one that shared that quote with Coach Franklin. So Michael is responsible for that quote being up. He's responsible for me coming and speaking to the team, allowing me to meet Coach Franklin. And it all just stemmed from a relationship we started in college 25 years ago. And I'm so thankful to call him a friend. I'm incredibly, so excited for what he's been able to do in his career, to be a major staple in one of the best football programs in the country. So it's really neat. And, while I do believe in that quote and think it stands on its own merit, I have the humility to acknowledge that the only reason it's at Penn State is because of a relationship I developed 25 years ago.
But relationships are key, and that's why you're here giving your time to me today. We've developed a relationship. You're so humble. The fact that it's there, it's there. The fact that you have that relationship, you're allowed to give yourself credit sometimes because the things that you say are affecting a lot of people in a really positive way. And I really thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Well, I'm hoping that ends up being a trivia question. Someday someone's going to say, what do Alan Stein Jr. and Gandhi have in common? And while you'd think there'd be a lot, the main thing that unites me and Gandhi is we both have quotes up at Penn State football.
No, you're both brilliant guys. You both have a lot in common. It's just you didn't really get a chance to hang out with one another, but you think a lot alike. So, Alan, we're going to end it with a couple of easy questions just to learn a little bit more about you and the things you do and who you are. So let's go. You're home, you have some time. What would you recommend as your favorite binge watch?
Ray Donovan. I'm almost done season 6, and I look forward to picking up season 7, which your son just mentioned started last night.
All right, so we could talk Ray Donovan. We'll do that offline. Like it a lot. Your favorite book besides Raise Your Game?
I would think the one that probably had the biggest influence on my life was Leading with the Heart by Coach K.
Love it. Coach K, incredible. I've read some of his stuff. What an amazing guy. No, not surprising that he keeps winning, right? Not surprising.
Exactly.
Boy, you think he could turn the Knicks around?
Oh, absolutely.
You listening, Dolan? There's not enough money to get him there, though. That's the problem. Your favorite food?
Probably sushi with pizza as a close second.
Do you have a favorite pizza place?
I like anything that's kind of New York style. I'm more of a thin crust type of guy. So yeah, there's a variety of places that are pretty good, but as you know firsthand, you can't beat New York pizza.
No. That's why I was going to say, do you have a favorite New York pizza place?
No, I'm still somewhat of a tourist there, so anything that looks authentic to New York when I go there is good enough for me.
Okay, remember the name Joe's. Highly recommending it, Joe's. Easy to remember. Let me know. Report back to me. And with all of you speaking, what's your favorite place to travel to?
Oh, really anywhere new. For me, and this will be a good note to end on, every time I go somewhere to speak, this is part of my preparation. Regardless of how nice the hotel is I'm staying, no matter how nice their fitness center is, I always try to go out to a local gym to work out before I speak. And I try to pick places that are not the big chains. Fitness or a Gold Gym. I try to find something a little native to the area. Then as soon as I leave there, I try to find a health food spot that, again, is not a chain, so it's not a Whole Foods that's local to the area. And now I'm in a stage of I'm keeping my hair pretty short. I have a skin fade. Then I try to find a local barber and get a haircut. And all three of those things are kind of my pre-speaking ritual. If I'm giving a morning keynote, I do those things the day before. If I'm giving an afternoon or an evening keynote, I do those things the day of or the morning of. And I really enjoy getting out and seeing other parts of not just the country, but of the world, and experiencing those three things. Working out and food and keeping my hair tight are things that bring me joy and happiness. And I just love, incorporating that into part of my routine.
Well, I'm with you on 2 out of 3. I don't have to keep my hair tight. It's permanently tight.
Yes, it is. And looking good.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate your time being here today. Give your kids a big hug from Uncle Craw. Look forward to seeing you soon. I'll be in town. I'll try and see if our schedules could link. And thanks for all that you're doing. It's great. Your messaging is great. And continued success to you.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you, Howie.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode of How We Doing It, hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources mentioned, visit HowieDoinIt.com. That's HowieDoinIt.com. Until next time, stay resilient and keep pushing forward.